But I'd like to now move on to, we've kind of had a broad look at and sort of refocusing our perspective of success. Let's now take a moment to redefine it. You can have a look in the next section of the workbook, just as I'm going through this now. But let's attempt to create a greater sense of clarity for you as an individual regarding your own success. We've previously sort of redefined our understanding of it, and all the concepts that you shared about success were fantastic, broad concepts, which is amazing. What we want to do now is try and focus it down to you as a person, you as an individual, your own success. So here we're no longer going to be looking for these fantastic inspirational quotes, which can be shared very nicely with a nice inspiring image. Here we're wanting to find something that is unique and specific to you. So let's redefine success. Activity 2.1 and 2.2. So please refer there, and I'll ask for a little bit of feedback in a moment. But I think what's really, really critical here is that we need to define success for ourselves. If we're just using a quote that we found on the internet, it's all good and great as maybe a starting point. But we need to be able to connect with what is success for us as an individual. If we don't have this idea in mind, if we're not able to really clarify what success is to us, ultimately we kind of shooting in the dark to some degree, which, well, we know that can be quite dangerous and frustrating. Ask yourself this question. Write this down, please share it in the chat as well. What is success to me individually? This isn't what you've heard, what's been sort of pushed to you, what maybe your parents pushed to you, what your sort of lecturers or business partners or whatever else. This is about you. And I'm hoping to find some massive transformative purpose.
You're more than welcome, if it's too much to type down in the chat, to unmute yourself and share with us. Please do.
Thanks, Liezel. Absolutely. And while you're considering this, maybe while you're writing this down, while you're scratching your head, sort of pondering this, what is success to me? An absolutely critical question. And this for me is probably my most favorite question, the why. The why I use in every situation all the time. It is, for me, the magic question. But we need to ask ourselves why. Why is whatever I've come up with for success, however I've defined success for myself, I need to ask why. If I cannot clearly and concisely share, even just with myself, why success is something so significant for me, is it really my own success? Is it my own definition?
Yeah. We have Paulina saying that success for me is a freedom to follow my own path.
Fantastic. Thanks, Paulina.
If I may share what success is for me, Lloyd, success for me is to be happy every day. If I can be happy every day, that is for me the ultimate. And something, and why is because I know if I'm happy, that I take that positive energy into everything I do and everybody I touch that day. That's my why.
Fantastic, thanks. And I think that's such a nice, simple example, personal example to share. Sort of happiness. Most of us do want happiness, and there's further discussions about what happiness is there. But as you say for yourself, that why is because you feel that you will be able to translate that positive energy that you have into other aspects. Yes. And so that idea, there's an understanding, a personal understanding, something that you can relate to, something that means something to you, which 100%. Is inspiring and motivating.
Yes.
To help you get through those hard times.
100%. We have, I don't know if it's Louis or Louise Silva. Personally, success is inner peace, being content with who I am and being true to myself. We have Guy saying that successful granddaughters, motivated, happy and free and achieving to individual ability. Wonderful things.
Great. Thank you. Please do keep these coming. And again, what I really, really just want to emphasize here is that why. We so often can create these concepts. we know for some reason, right, I want, this inner peace. But why? Why is that something that I'm motivated to achieve? If I cannot understand what my motivation is, I'm going to struggle, particularly in those hard times, in those pandemic times like we went through last year, when everybody's motivations and energy levels got sapped. That's when we really got to tap into the core sort of raw motivation of what our success is and why we want it.
Just one last.
Yes.
Reading you were going to read it.
Yeah, measurable positive impact on others. Fantastic. And Lance, again, I asked the question of why. Why is that important to you? Because that, absolutely. That resonates with me. I think that sounds like something that aligns to my idea of success as well. But why? So your legacy, okay? And again, I asked that why. We can ask why all day long. And I generally do with my clients. But it's such an important way that we're able to break down our understanding so that we can really get down to the kind of nuts and bolts of it, so that we can really connect and relate and sort of harness it for ourselves. Success to me is a holistic wellness for me, my loved ones. Okay. Lance, as a coach, this is your purpose. Okay. Fantastic. So I think there's a general idea, it's sort of good understanding here. This idea of sort of redefining success. Again, I just want to, and sorry if it does sound like I'm repeating myself here, but it's so important that we really connect and understand this concept of redefining. It's not just sort of taking a moment to go, okay, well, let's find a new quote that expresses success. Redefining is about making it personal. Connect with it. I'm going to be moving on now. And my screen has just disappeared. Okay. So we're going to be shifting now our focus to the idea of decision-making in relationships. Because these are really, really cool. And what I'd like to start with here is, first and foremost, just redefining these terms of decision-making and relationships. And I'd like to redefine them as what I do and how I am as a person. So what I do as a person, as an individual, and how I am as an individual. What I really like about this is it helps us sort of connect and understand these terms and concepts in, I think, a far more personal way, which is really, really important here. So what I do, obviously, this is the actions and decisions that I take. Decision making is absolutely critical. We make thousands and thousands and thousands of decisions every single day. Sometimes we don't even realize it. But making decisions is so important to leading us towards reaching our success and sort of opening up a positive experience in our life. But what's so important to realize is that actions have consequences. And we need to be comfortable with the fact that what we do, what we choose, has consequences, positive and negative, depending. I know Liesel's going to be launching a course on decision making, and this will definitely tie right in there with what she's got lined up there. But I'd like to just use an example here. Joe Green. I'm not sure if any of you who know who Joe Green is, but Joe Green was the former roommate of Mark Zuckerberg. So they were at university together. They shared a room, and Joe Green had an opportunity to leave college and go off and start and build Facebook with Mark Zuckerberg. Unfortunately, Joe engaged with his father, who was a professor at the university, and he took his father's advice to sort of stay at university, finish his formal education, and make a success sort of in a traditional sense. Well, we all know how this story turned out because, well, Facebook is valued at, over $10 billion now. So Joe could have been in a position where he could have been part and parcel of a $10 billion company, but he didn't. He chose to listen to his father's advice. Now, I'm not saying don't listen to your parents, because they generally are wise, or wiser than us at times. But the important consideration here is that he listened to a person's advice and he acted on that. He made a decision. He's got to be comfortable with the fact that, well, he could have been part of the $10 billion industry or company, and now he's not. Although he is apparently still friends with Mark Zuckerberg, so maybe that helps. But this just emphasizes actions have consequences. That it might be short-term consequences, might be long-term consequences, but at the end of the day, there's a cause and effect relationship that we really, really need to be aware of. When it comes to decision making, I think what is so important, and I was having a discussion with a client just the other day about, his anxiety about making the right decisions. And I said to him, let's scrap this idea of the right decisions. What is the right decision? Joe listened to his dad, and from his dad's perspective, the right decision was to stay at university. Was that the right decision for Joe? Does he have regret? I don't know. But from his dad's perspective, the right decision was to finish university. So when it comes to the right decision, everybody's going to have a different right decision perspective. So we've got to scrap this idea of the right decision, because there is actually no right decision. What there is, however, is the best decision for us. How do we identify what is the best for us? And well, at the end of the day, it sort of where that sits is within ourselves, how well we know ourselves. If we don't know ourselves, we're never going to know what's best for us. So I just want to really emphasize that point when it comes to decision making. My screen keeps disappearing. Moving on to this idea of how I am. Now, I often ask my clients, in terms of this idea of sort of, people often ask, well, who are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself. I'm more interested in how you are as a person, not who you are as a person, because we can be whoever we want to be. We can pretend to be whoever we want to be. I'm interested in how you are, how you go about living your life a certain way. And I think this is really important, because how I am relates to the relationships that we have with those around us, and very, very importantly, with ourselves. The relationship that we have with ourselves is absolutely core. It's fundamental to how we live our lives. My book, The Core, is really focused on highlighting and emphasizing why this is so important in our lives. So how I'm in my relationships, how I develop them, how I connect, how I relate, how I communicate with people, that is so important. Very often, how we get with others is often a representation of how we are with ourselves. If we're happy and content with ourselves, well, that manifests in the relationships with others. If we are quite abrasive and defensive with others, well, that often relates to the relationship that we have with ourselves. Are we fighting something within ourselves? Are we avoiding something within ourselves? But it's so important that we start to sort of shift the focus inwards. When we started in the beginning, we just sort of were talking about this broad concept of success. Now we shifted it sort of personally. Now we shifted it even further inside to you as an individual, the individual that makes you unique. The activities in the workbook, activity 2.4 to 2.6, should help guide a little bit of thinking around this. Obviously they're quite broad questions, but, take some time to work through that. We don't really have time to explore that in too much detail, but the questions there of I am, it's always interesting when you start to list sort of off the bat, sort of how you perceive yourself. Sometimes we practice this because we've been in situations where we've been asked. Other times we sit there scratching our head going, I don't know, how do I describe myself? This can be such an important activity because it starts us, or it encourages us to actually reflect on this. How do I generally think about and treat other people? How do I think about other people? How do I understand this idea of connecting, engaging with other people, this concept of relationships? And very, very importantly, again, I know I'm extremely biased on this, but this for me is absolutely fundamental, is how do I generally think about and treat myself? I find it so incredible working with individuals. When you start talking, every single conversation, every client of mine, we revert back to this idea of the relationship with ourselves. And there's always work to be done there, always. It's not a bad thing. It's a lifelong process. But are we aware of the work that we need to do there? I think that's a really important thing to consider here. Let's just jump back there. So that can be very helpful here. And I'm not going to go through this in a lot of detail, but this is a tool I did share briefly on one of the talks last year in the DE community. But it's a tool that I've called the ATF problem analysis tool. And that's actions, thoughts, and feelings. Because what I find is that people get so caught up in this trying to make sense of things when everything is just sort of merged together, blurred together, and it's so difficult to actually put it apart and make sense of things. So this ATF tool can be really, really helpful to sort of help you compartmentalize things. And it breaks the process down from our actions, so the things that we do or have done to try and address a problem, for example, how we think about it, how we conceptualize it in another bubble, and then the most important thing is how we feel about this particular problem, the emotions related to it. When we start to sort of break it down, we start to gain a different perspective and clarity and understanding on the situation, which then empowers us to make the necessary change and growth and so on. This can be such a useful tool to use, but please be warned, it's not an easy tool to engage with in the beginning, because it sort of asks you to think quite differently. Most of my clients give me the feedback that it's so difficult to separate the thoughts from actions because they're kind of blurred together. And when they start thinking about feelings, and as I just said now, thinking about the feelings, they start giving the thoughts and how they justify their feelings in their thinking space. We want to just try and stay in those sort of compartments, those boxes. It takes practice. So please practice. If you got feedback along the way, please do obviously after this talk, please do share that with me. But it can be incredibly helpful. And I encourage you to work through this, at least sort of work through the thinking process, because I think it will be very, very helpful.